Hi, I'm Ron.
And I'm Don.
And this is the Ron and Don Show. Thank you for joining us today. Our topic today is part 2 in a 2-part series on walk-in cooler, walk-in freezer issues.
Walk-in cooler panels we discussed on how they're made in the previous section. And it's two pieces of metal with insulated foam in between. It's all manufactured under high pressure, whole 9 yards. And the ceiling panels, and if you have a manufactured floor, are also manufactured the same way. Oftentimes the manufactured floors have steel because aluminum is just too easily penetrated. So that's probably the only difference. But when the walk-in cooler or freezer walls get saturated with moisture, or ceilings, then they lose their insulation capacity. You get all kinds of condensation forming on the outside of the box, any of the 6 directions. And that can be a problem, especially where, let's say, the one wall is against an outside wall and you get all kinds of mold generated there, which then grows up over the top of the box on any wood trusses or cardboard you got stored up above, and you got a real problem. Your insulated value is gone, so you're having trouble holding temperatures. You get stagnation of air inside of walk-ins naturally, so the outside wall, food that's within a few inches of the outside wall, may be at 50, 55 degrees, and out in the middle it may be at 40 degrees. So you have some loss of product. You're in a death spiral at that point for those walk-in walls and or ceiling and or floors from saturated insulation.
Now let's talk about floors in walk-in coolers and walk-in freezers. First, we'll start with a walk-in cooler. A floor system needs to be matched to the environment that it's in for a walk-in cooler. If a walk-in cooler is being placed into an environment where it's slab on grade, and that means a concrete floor with basically dirt below it, then you do not need an insulated floor in a walk-in cooler. Now, a walk-in freezer is a little bit different scenario. A walk-in freezer must have an insulated floor. That's either a site-built insulated floor that's built into and below the slab, or is part of the actual box itself. A walk-in cooler in an environment where it's not slab on grade, for example, if a kitchen or back of house area has a parking garage or even a number of floors below it, that walk-in cooler will also need a manufactured insulated floor.
When we're talking about insulated floors, as he said, there's 2 kinds. The manufacturer themselves make 2 kinds. One of them is a standard compression and capability, and they also make a structural one that can take more weight on it. Again, it's basically 2 pieces of metal with high density foam injected in between it, so it is compressible and it is breakable, and you do have seams between these things. So let's say you're rolling kegs on a cart over those seams. Those seams are going to do this every time you go over them. If you have a bunch of cases of meat, frozen shrimp, 50-pound master packs, 4 high on a 2-wheel cart, you're running over that floor, those seams are going to do this, and they'll eventually open to the point where you get moisture going down through. Some of the problems with the manufactured floor are also that they hold water in the seams, because that is actually the lowest point for each seam, is that little gasketed area between each seam, and it's just a little bit low. So when you warp that water goes down into the insulation. If it's not much, it doesn't do much damage. But when you walk across a floor and you've got your nice shoes on and your nice pants on, and it shoots a nice squirt of really nasty water right up your pant leg and saturates your sock, and you stink for the rest of the day, that insulated floor has had it.
I think you used the right term in the prior episode. You called it the death spiral.
Yeah, you are in the death spiral of that floor.
It's just a matter of time.
Now, if it's in a walk-in freezer and the floor gets wet and freezes, it will freeze everything below it. And I've had built-in floors that it froze down. It froze the slab below it, and it froze 3 feet down. We dug out dirt that was frozen 3 feet down, and we had to replace all that because it's now structurally compromised. We had to replace all that dirt and gravel down below, build it back up, put in a new slab and then build up the insulated floor on top of that. So a wet floor is, you're in deep trouble.
So what we're talking about here is, of course, the manufactured floor that Don has just described. If the site constructed subfloor is not done correctly or the system fails, you ultimately end up with what I would basically call permafrost.
Yeah.
And it can go down for a number of feet, and you can see a lot of ancillary effects to the areas around that space if that does occur. Take a look at this graph. What you see here is a thermal barrier between the horizontal floor and the vertical wall. A sealed layer of insulation ensures that no water gets in there, and you've got a layer of structural concrete on top, followed by another moisture barrier, and then whatever you choose to use as a finished floor. Now you can do a finished concrete in there, you could do a quarry tile, there could even be some applied floors on top of either one of those to be bar mats, things like that help protect that finished floor from what Don just described, big beer kegs being dropped on the floor and things like that.
Now, all walk-in coolers and walk-in freezers have to have a vacuum air break. When the warm, humid air goes into the walk-ins when you open the doors, it cools that air down quickly. And because the air mass going in is warm, the molecules in the air are far apart. Cold air, the molecules coalesce and come together. And it creates a vacuum inside the walk-in coolers, walk-in freezers. And if it doesn't have some vacuum break, you try to go back in 20, 30 seconds later, you can't pull that door open until enough air leaks in through the seams to allow you to pull that door open. Or if you can pull that door open, it is a major pull, and you'll hear that as you get that door just slightly cracked. There's a vacuum brake system. It looks like a T. Some of them are now flush mounted within the walls, but the older ones look like a PVC T, but it's just got a little ping pong ball in there that allows air to go into the walk-in cooler when it is in a vacuum, and then it seals it so air does not come out through it. And in a walk-in freezer, it must be a heated one. When you have windows in walk-ins, they're very useful for safety, but at the same point in time, in a walk-in freezer, you're going to have to heat that window.
To what Don was just describing, when a door is opened and closed like that, that rush of warm air comes in, there are also thermostat sensor bulbs that are usually placed somewhere very near the door so that they can sense that warm air and immediately kick that evaporator back on as well.
Exactly. Now you'll have your evaporator placement in the walk-ins. If it's a long walk-in, you probably need it in the wall that is the long wall, the center of the long wall, and on the opposite wall from the door, even if the door is at each end. If it's a very small walk-in, then you're going to mount it directly in front of the door opposite. That gives you the best movement of air, so you don't get that stagnation and just bands of different temperatures of air as you move away from the walls. You also have all kinds of other little devices. You may have a thermometer built into the wall of the walk-in. Well, guess where that bulb for that thermometer is? It's right there next to the door. So it's never going to sense the proper temperature inside that walk-in, except first thing in the morning when the walk-in hasn't been open for overnight. So you need to have other mobile thermometers inside your walk-in to have a better idea what the temperature is. And they'll hold, if you go in there and read them right away, they aren't going to be affected for 30 seconds to a minute away from the door by having had the door open to enter. And if in some cases where we had to really maintain temperature carefully on things, we'll stick a thermometer in a product. And in walk-in coolers, I've known in the past a number of times we've been worried about it. Where we had water bottles stored in a walk-in, we just uncorked one of the water bottles and put a thermometer in it and left it in it. That'll tell you what your mean temperature is. It won't tell you the high, it won't tell you the low, but it'll tell you what it's been holding at for the past hour or two.
A couple of final thoughts I'll share as well. I've been into a number of coolers over the years and seen water in what is either the torpedo or submarine lights, that the old style lights that incandescent lights that used to hang in there, or now there's LED strip lights that are in a lot of these coolers. When you see water in either whatever style of light, it probably means that the conduit that is feeding the electrical to that light then stubs above the walk-in cooler, and if it's not sealed properly, you get that warm, moist air coming into that cold environment, and that's where the condensation builds up inside these lights. So be aware of that, and if you see that in there, it's obviously a problem mixing water and electricity, and that should be dealt with as well. Final thought I've got is I've seen a number of older, long-time service walk-in coolers and freezers that the doors have failed, and they're not closing properly. The wall beside them could even be a little loose and moving around from the old hinges and many years of service. They now have a bolt-on application of walk-in cooler, walk-in freezer doors with a jamb so that the entire unit can be replaced. And those either come from the original cooler manufacturers, or there are a number of aftermarket companies out there that provide those, but it can bring new life to an old walk-in.
Those bulkhead doors are common. There are a number of manufacturers that'll send you a new door itself if the panel itself is okay. And you can always go back to the original manufacturer with the model and serial number, and in many cases they can build you a whole new panel to slide into where that old panel came out of. It's a little tricky, but it's not all that difficult. There's a lot of little tips, and we have more we could share, but
we're out of time. I'm Ron.
And I'm Don.
This is the Ron and Don Show, presented by RIFMA.
Thank you for viewing.